Our reading for this week has something that is unique in it, something very surprising. Let me tell you what that is. Shalom, my friends. This week in synagogue, we read from the book of Deuteronomy, the Ten Commandments. And there's something absolutely stunning about the Ten Commandments in the book of Deuteronomy. The commandment at issue is the Fourth Commandment, the commandment to observe Shabbat. We all know that the first version of the Ten Commandments, which is in the book of Exodus, tells us to remember Shabbat, while Deuteronomy tells us to observe Shabbat, the Sabbath. But that's not the biggest difference. Usually, when the Bible tells us what to do, it does not explain why or what not to do. No explanation. For example, using the Ten Commandments, you can't commit murder. Doesn't say why. You cannot commit adultery. It doesn't say why. You cannot steal. It doesn't say why. But if we look, for example, at commandment number 5, honor your mother and your father, we read, so that you may long endure on the land that the Lord your God is giving you. It's telling us the result of honoring parents. That is called a motive clause. Well, in Exodus, the motive clause for Shabbat, the reason we keep the Sabbath, is because God created the universe in 6 days and rested on the seventh. However long a day was, that's a conversation for another time. In Exodus, when the Ten Commandments are given, God is the speaker. In Deuteronomy, Moses is speaking. He's repeating the Ten Commandments to the Israelites before he dies. And when he gets to Shabbat, the Sabbath, not only does he change the first word from remember to observe, but the motive clause he changes completely. Doesn't mention a word about the stages of creation. Instead, you observe Shabbat because you were slaves in the land of Egypt. Now, what does that have to do with the Sabbath? Very simple. A slave doesn't get a Sabbath unless that slave was fortunate enough to be a slave in ancient Israel, because the commandment goes on to say that it is not just a day of rest for you, but for your servants, for your workers, for your slaves. It's actually the same word. Eved can mean worker or slave. Even your animals get a day of rest on the Sabbath. I find this very powerful, that Moses would actually change the wording of the Ten Commandments. What do you suppose he had in mind? If you have some thoughts on that, leave them in the comments below. But I'm going to suggest that Moses wants to make sure that we understand how much God and how much the Torah hates slavery. In fact, go back to commandment number 1. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, literally the house of slaves. The Ten Commandments begins by saying God took us out of slavery in Egypt. It doesn't say, I am the Lord your God who created the universe, so you better listen to what I say. That would be powerful. That would make sense. But no, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. Very, very powerful teaching. And it undermines the argument of anyone who would say the Bible is not an appropriate source of moral values. The Bible is a pro-slavery book. It imposes limitations on slavery. Eventually, the institution of slavery is eliminated. And this begins, I think, with this revision of the Ten Commandments by Moses. Just something to think about on Shabbat. Please do subscribe to the channel by clicking on my face over here, or check out my last video by clicking on the icon over here. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom.